The problem that we have is that the producers aren't going to line up as long as there's an emissions cap that would require them to curtail their production.
We're only going to accept the best deal for Canada. That is very much informed by our discussions.
There seems to be an appetite to talk about getting pipelines built so that we can get oil and gas to market.
While Ottawa plays political chess with Alberta's energy future, Premier Danielle Smith just revealed her hand, and it's not what anyone expected.
We don't support lifting the tanker ban, the oil tanker ban, off the north coast of British Columbia.
The problem is, unless we address the 9 terrible policies that have damaged investor confidence, we're not going to get the proponents coming forward with major investments.
Smith said no company will agree to build a pipeline to the northern BC coast as long as there is a tanker ban, and oil sands companies aren't going to expand their production as long as there's a federal emissions cap. What happens when a province decides it's had enough of federal roadblocks?
But it has, I think, caused everyone to realize just how dependent we are, that we don't have an energy east that would have allowed us to be solely reliant.
Smith's latest announcement proves Alberta isn't backing down from this pipeline fight. The province is now actively courting private sector players to bypass federal interference entirely. Think about it. When was the last time you saw a premier essentially tell Ottawa to step aside while they handle business themselves?
Which is why I'm asking for those 9 bad laws to be either substantially modified or repealed.
Here's what really gets me. The federal government continues its strategic dance of environmental virtue signaling while Alberta's economy bleeds billions. Smith said that 9 federal policies, including the oil and gas emissions cap and the tanker ban on British Columbia's northern coast, discourage companies from proposing pipeline projects in Canada. 9 separate policies. That's not regulatory oversight. That's systematic suffocation of an entire industry.
If the federal government is willing to take the political heat for it, it'll be just like Trans Mountain expansion. They can make that happen. They have the constitutional jurisdiction.
The same government that bought Trans Mountain for $4.5 billion is now blocking Alberta's attempts to create new pathways to market. Premier Eby said he does not support tens of billions of dollars in federal subsidies to build this new pipeline when we already own a pipeline that empties into British Columbia. So Ottawa will spend billions on existing infrastructure, but won't allow provinces to pursue private alternatives? The logic here is twisted beyond recognition.
We want all of the environmental regulations from the federal government removed, and we want the freedom to abandon carbon pricing if we so choose.
But Smith's strategy reveals something much deeper than a simple pipeline dispute. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says a new panel will hit the road this summer with an eye on devising new measures for Alberta to assert autonomy and shield its economy from what she calls federal overreach. This isn't just about oil anymore. It's about provincial autonomy versus federal control. You know what's really telling? The interprovincial tensions are reaching a boiling point that nobody seems willing to acknowledge. British Columbia is pushing back against Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's proposal for a bitumen pipeline to BC's northern coast.
For the pipeline project that Premier Smith is a great enthusiast of, a heavy oil pipeline project, there is no project, there is no proponent, there is no private sector money involved at all.
The decades-old pipeline tug-of-war between British Columbia and Alberta has erupted once again, with BC Premier David Eby firmly rejected accusations that his government is deliberately obstructing a proposed oil pipeline championed by Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. When provinces start publicly feuding over energy infrastructure, we're witnessing the unraveling of Confederation itself.
Smith has called her pitch a, quote, grand bargain, less pollution by using cleaner technologies in exchange for more port access.
Despite all this pushback, Smith keeps pushing forward with what she calls a grand bargain approach. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith backs revived West Coast pipeline plan tied to emissions cuts and Indigenous equity. She's essentially offering environmental concessions and Indigenous partnerships as part of the deal. But even these olive branches aren't enough for federal bureaucrats who seem more interested in killing projects than finding solutions.
Oil is by far the most valuable export for Canada. Any of the projects that you will see on the ultimate list, I will tell you that a bitumen pipeline will be by far the greatest benefit to all of Canada.
Look, I get it. The environmental lobby is having a field day with Alberta's latest moves. As a trade war looms, Premier Smith is meeting with officials to promote Canadian oil they don't even want. But here's what they're not telling you. American oil import data shows they absolutely do want Canadian crude, especially the heavy oil that their refineries are specifically designed to process. At the same time, Smith's critics are painting her as some kind of climate denier, but the reality is far more nuanced. Speaking at the UCP annual general meeting, the Premier took shots at the federal government and vowed not to budge an inch. When you're fighting for your province's economic survival, compromise starts looking like surrender pretty quickly.
Where Alberta's coming to the table and saying, we want pipelines this way, that way, and the other way.
The real problem? The federal government's approach has created a perfect storm of regulatory paralysis. Companies won't invest in projects they know will be blocked. Provinces won't cooperate when they're being systematically undermined. And taxpayers are left holding the bag for everyone's political posturing. Pipelines to the West Coast have long been at the top of the Canadian energy industry's wish list to help reduce producers' reliance on the international market. Yet somehow, reducing dependence on American markets has become politically impossible in Canada.
But Doug has also talked about the potential for us to have a pipeline route going up to James Bay.
What really shocked me was how, even when provinces try to work together, federal interference continues. The premiers of Alberta and Ontario will meet in Calgary today to sign 2 new memoranda of understanding. Smith is building alliances with other premiers, creating a coalition of provinces that are tired of federal micromanagement. This isn't just about Alberta anymore. It's about whether provinces have any real authority over their own resources.
I would say that people understand the threat of having a single customer, that we need to trade more with each other and support each other.
I'm convinced the federal government's strategy seems designed to force Alberta into exactly this kind of confrontation. They've created enough regulatory barriers to make private investment nearly impossible. Then they act surprised when provinces start talking about autonomy and separation. In this case, Smith was essentially saying to the effect, not necessarily separation, but separation if necessary. That's not rhetoric, that's a warning. These political games affect all of us, and someone needs to keep tracking the fallout. And for that, we are here. So subscribe to our channel to never miss any future updates.
In the absence of a project to fast track, does that satisfy your demands while you work on the other things?
Now, about that train wreck of a federal provincial meeting in Saskatoon. It proved exactly how isolated Alberta has become on this pipeline issue. Smith went into the meeting warning that any list that didn't include new pipelines would send a bad message to her province, demanding that 9 federal policies, including the oil and gas emissions cap and tanker ban, be eliminated. What she got instead was political theater disguised as cooperation.
Well, you have to understand just how damaged Alberta is by the fact that we didn't get pipelines built. If we had built...
Talk about political abandonment. The other premiers essentially left Smith hanging out to dry during those crucial Saskatoon discussions, while the assembled leaders discussed a draft list of national interest projects to be fast-tracked through the approval process. Smith left the meeting, saying it's up to political leaders to find a proponent for a new pipeline. This literally means nobody stepped up to support her pipeline demands when it actually mattered.
The Prime Minister is meeting with the premiers right now, discussing a trade deal with the United States and interprovincial trade. The Prime Minister also weighing in on an agreement between Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario that was signed this morning.
Even worse, even conservative premiers, who should theoretically be Alberta's natural allies, gave Smith lukewarm support at best. Ford and Smith, along with Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, signed a memorandum of understanding on Tuesday to build pipelines, rail lines, and trade infrastructure. But this came only after the main federal meeting had already concluded without concrete pipeline commitments. It's like getting a consolation prize after losing the main event.
I've made that point very clear to the Prime Minister, and I'm looking forward to working with him and his Energy Minister to see how quickly we can address those underlying factors.
The federal response to Smith's pipeline demands at that meeting was essentially a masterclass in bureaucratic stonewalling. Smith believes Mark Carney is serious about constructing an oil pipeline to the north coast of British Columbia, but says the Prime Minister must do more than speed up approvals to get anyone besides the federal government to build and pay for it. So Carney's big solution is faster approvals for projects that still won't get approved. That's not leadership, that's political gaslighting.
It's not my job to come in and tell Premier Smith that her vision for a North Coast pipeline is many, many years off, and there's no proponent.
Having an energy corridor to northern British Columbia that includes a bitumen pipeline would be a good first step in the communique.
And if that wasn't bad enough, the meeting exposed just how much British Columbia is willing to undermine Alberta's economic interests. British Columbia pushed back against Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's proposal for a bitumen pipeline to BC's northern coast during the meeting in Saskatoon. When your neighboring province actively sabotages your economic development plans at a national meeting, that's not federalism, that's economic warfare.
Canadian premiers say they want to reduce our reliance on the U.S. After calling for federal support on new oil pipelines this morning, they are taking their concerns directly to the Prime Minister.
What really frustrated me was how the federal government used the meeting to create an illusion of progress while delivering absolutely nothing concrete. Premiers heaped praise on the meeting with Carney, but no specific projects were identified. They spent taxpayer money flying everyone to Saskatoon for what amounts to an expensive photo opportunity with zero tangible outcomes for Alberta's pipeline ambitions.
Pipeline companies, they say every single one of them, the very best option for Canada to expand its markets, have a substantial new pipeline, is a pipeline to the northwest BC coast.
Smith's post-meeting statements revealed her growing realization that federal cooperation is essentially a myth. The fact that she immediately started talking about private sector solutions and provincial partnerships shows she understands the federal government has no intention of actually helping Alberta access tidewater markets. When premiers leave national unity meetings talking about going it alone, that's a sign the Federation is fundamentally broken.
We're going to continue to push for it because it's a good project, it's good for our country.
Finally, the question isn't whether Alberta will get its pipeline. It's whether Canada can survive the political earthquake that's coming if they don't. Smith has made her position crystal clear. Alberta will pursue its economic interests with or without federal cooperation. The ball is now in Ottawa's court, but based on their track record and that disastrous Saskatoon meeting, I wouldn't hold my breath for any kind of reasonable response. What do you think happens next? Drop your predictions in the comments down below.